Mr President, I seek leave to move Notice of Motion Private Business number 25 standing in my name in an amended form.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
Mr President, I move that a select committee of the Legislative Council be established to inquire into and report on the prohibition of neo-Nazi symbols with particular reference to A. the symbols used to identify and promote neo-Nazi and other ideologically motivated extreme far-right groups and options to prohibit their display. B. the activities of neo-Nazi and other ideologically motivated extremist groups in South Australia. C. discrimination faced by Jewish, South Australians and other groups within the community targeted by neo-Nazi and other ideologically motivated extremist groups. D. prohibitions on such symbols in other jurisdictions, including proposed prohibitions. E. the requirements of the Australian Constitution and other legal matters relevant to the prohibition of neo-Nazi symbols. And F. any other relevant matters. 2. that the committee consists of 4 members and that the quorum of members necessary to be present at all meetings of the committee be fixed at 3 members. And 3. that this council permits the select committee to authorise the disclosure or publication as it sees fit of any evidence or documents presented to the committee prior to such evidence being presented to the council.
Seconded. Seconded.
I move the motion standing in my name. I'm pleased to call for the establishment of this committee. The image of a fascist salute on the steps of the Adelaide Holocaust Museum and Steiner Education Centre was abhorrent. There's been no consequence for this action because currently this is not a prohibited activity. The Australia-wide neo-Nazi organisation responsible for this action and other ideologically motivated extremist groups need to be investigated and dealt with. Many of you would have read the article published in the On D student paper at the University of Adelaide calling for death to the State of Israel. Again, there have been no consequences for this publication because this is not a prohibited activity. Any practical tools we can give our law enforcement, the better. Any sensible way we can keep our community safer. I want to ensure the public that this select committee will include a broad community of constituents affected by these organised groups. We will consult with local Jewish community, people of gender diversity, disabled community, people of other ethnicities and races, all of whom have been targeted by neo-Nazi groups. The committee will help to identify the scope of the problem and hear suggestions from experts on how to resolve this. As previously mentioned, this is not about stopping historical displays or educational pieces. It's not about banning the use of ancient religious symbols. It's about halting the glorification of Nazis and the intimidation of the community by the brazen use of a hate symbol. All avenues should be approached in the effort to stamp out racial hatred. I trust my colleagues here to agree that establishing a select committee is the right thing to do.
The Honourable Mr Hunter. Is it seconded? Put the question. Those for questions say aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. The Honourable's game and order of the day for. Seconded. Put the question. Those for questions say aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. Clerk.
There's a motion private business number 26. The Honourable S.L. Game to move.
Honourable Mr Game.
Thank you, Mr President. I seek leave to move Notice of Motion Private Business number 26 standing in my name in an amended form.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
Mr President, I move that this council acknowledges that parent alienating behaviours are a form of child abuse and family violence. There are 3 documented levels of alienation. Mild parental alienation, where a child maintains contact with the targeted parent but has become influenced and aligned with the alienating parent. Moderate parental alienation, when transition to a targeted parent's care is difficult for a child because of the alienating parent's pattern of behaviour and language. After transition, the child will bond with the targeted parent. And severe parental alienation, a child emphatically rejects the targeted parent and refuses all interaction. Secondly, parental alienating behaviours may include A. emotional harm, B. coercion and fear tactics, C. threats, intimidation, stalking and harassment, D. physical and sexual abuse of both the child and or targeted parent, E. economic exploitation, F. gaslighting and manipulation, and G. isolation and abduction. And thirdly, the impacts of parent alienating behaviours are long-lasting for the alienated child, the targeted parent and targeted extended family and support members.
We have a seconder. Seconded. The question. Those are questions. Sorry. Continue. The Honourable Game.
A 2021 Australian research paper defines parental alienating behaviour as a form of family violence during and/or after separation when a targeted parent is rejected by his or her children for no justifiable reason. The rejection is provoked by nothing more than a campaign of alienating behaviours used by an alienating parent and his/her allies to hinder the relationship. Parent alienation has a negative impact on all members of the family affected by it and occurs regardless of nationality, religion or gender. I want to see the Parliament and the courts taking this matter seriously. It's a well-documented issue, researched by people in Australia and around the world. To ignore its existence is to perpetuate family violence. It extends to grandparents and other family members, all those who play an important role in a child's upbringing. I am dedicated to ensuring that parental alienating behaviours become legitimised as abuse in legislation and regulations. To the children involved, it causes an utter corruption of their reality and can cause a loss of identity and connection to family, community and relationships. Parental alienation occurs through a pervasive, targeted campaign which seeks to create conflict and distrust between the child and one of the parents, despite any form of positive relationship. A groundbreaking 2016 study utilising telephone interviews produced the first known representative poll to determine the prevalence of alienating behaviours. The results were staggering. It suggested that millions of adults and their children may be impacted by alienating behaviours and that it is across all socio-economic and demographic indicators. This is a widespread issue. Why is it not being addressed? This is an unrecognised crisis for thousands of South Australian families, yet neither the current nor previous governments have acknowledged the problem exists. I'm putting this on the agenda and being a voice for those families until we see legislative amendments and procedural change in our courts. If a parent calls out an ex-partner for participating in parent alienating behaviours, it can result in a worsening of conditions, an increase in false accusations and extended detriment to children, just like other forms of family violence and abuse. These parents feel helpless. They have no voice, no backing in the legislation or court system. In one American study, 85% of participants surveying both targeted parents and reunited targeted children described parent alienating behaviours as child abuse. It is described as introducing a false fear and being emotionally manipulative. The result is the infliction of deep psychological wounds. As one respondent describes, no one has the right to mess with the child's head. A small Australian 2020 study sought comment from 54 self-referred alienated parents referred to in the literature as target parents, 52% of them fathers, 48% mothers. The leading cause of parental alienating behaviours identified by the targeted parent was revenge. Revenge for a new romantic relationship, to punish someone for leaving, to inflict financial anxiety through increased child support payments, the list goes on. The second leading identified cause was mental health. This is a major mental health crisis for these South Australian parents, yet they remain unrecognised, despite the government's pledge to prioritise mental health. One of the several victims I spoke with, a father of 3 boys, told me of the long-term impacts these behaviours had on his children and his own life. The lies spread about him resulted in his working with children's cheque being temporarily revoked, which is now fully reinstated, and that leading to the loss of his job. The stress of the court proceedings and constantly having to reschedule court appearances flowed on to other financial impacts. He was not able to secure steady work for almost 3 years whilst these court proceedings continued. Now reunited with his sons, they are able to articulate the full extent of the parental alienating behaviours they experienced, and the eldest told him that the mother stated that he, the father, would bash him and his brothers despite there being no history of violence. The middle child had to be treated for stomach ulcers due to being heavily over-medicated by the mother with ADHD treatments. It kept him sedated and under control. His youngest son barely knows him, having been alienated from age 4. He is now only getting to know his dad for the first time. This example is similar to many stories I have heard from concerned South Australians. In this instance, there was successful reunification with the targeted parent. Many people my office has dealt with remain in anguish, struggling through the family court system and desperate to see their children. It is critical to acknowledge the effect on children involved in these cases. The alienating parent often has no insight that their behaviour has an impact of such consequence. They refuse or are unable to understand the child's losses and the long-term impact those losses have cumulatively on a child. The removal of prior support networks and loved ones, often into extended family units, can cause long-term damage and relationship issues. At least 2 separate studies have suggested that alienating parents exhibit a high presentation of cognitive distortion, which is described as an irrational thought pattern at the onset of or a psychopathological state. Relationship counsellors must be aware of this form of family violence and abuse and able to recognise the signs and offer appropriate support, which includes a currently unavailable pathway for legal and domestic violence referrals. Both studies demonstrated that parental cognitive distortion can cause distress on children, who in turn have a higher presentation of mimicked cognitive distortions themselves. Cognitive distortion is well described in cognitive behavioural therapy literature, and it can lead to mental illness. A 2018 article in the International Journal of Family Issues acknowledged that more than half of the surveyed target parents reported their child had been taken away from them in a manner akin to kidnapping or abduction. This was again reiterated in a 2021 paper by different authors. The more recent article collated 4 years of research from Australia, Canada, USA, Israel and the United Kingdom. We've all heard horror stories of children being taken for a holiday by one parent and not returning. This style of abduction happens more regularly in Australia than you would think, shifting house suddenly without notice, ignoring custody arrangements or moving interstate and not forwarding details. On a less extreme level, people know that family break-up within their sphere where one parent has subtly and pervasively discredited the other in front of the child, told petty lies, made visitations difficult. This impacts thousands of South Australians. Key findings from a study released earlier this year noted the profound, lasting impact parental alienating behaviours had on children later into their adulthood. 95% reported emotional pain, 55% continued to report depression and or anxiety, 50% of respondents noted maladapted coping strategies or reported past or current substance abuse, 40% had diagnosed personality difficulties or self-esteem issues, 30% reported suicidal ideation, and 20% suffered eating disorders and body issues. And one adult reflected, "I'm still stuck in this mess that someone else created, and I'm still grieving the person I was, and I still find it hard to build up trust." We should acknowledge that parental alienating behaviours do indeed constitute a form of child abuse. I'd like to acknowledge Amanda Stillers and the team at Eeny Meeny Miny Mo Foundation for their relentless work in advocating for target parents and the reunification of children across Australia. Together with advocates and researchers, I will be persistent in following this topic through, working hard to investigate legislative options as well as appropriate regulations for affected families.
Mr Hunter.
Might be now adjourned.
Is that seconded? Put the question. Those for questions say aye. Against, say no. The ayes have it. The honourable game. An order of the day for the next Wednesday of sitting. Seconded. Put the question. Those for the question say aye. Against, say no. The ayes have it. Clerk.